If you have listened for the 20 years I've been on, or for the first day, for example, in Tri-Cities, Kingsport, Johnson City, Bristol, Virginia, our new affiliate, Super Talk 92.9, whether you're a one-day listener or a 20-year listener, you've heard me say many times, the most impactful book I have read as an executive ever is Team of Teams by General Stan McChrystal and Chris Fussell. And I've talked at length with General McChrystal before about that, about his book Leaders. And they are back now, and Chris Fussell's also written One Mission, How Leaders Build a Team of Teams. General McChrystal and Chris Fussell join me this morning. Of course, General McChrystal, 34 years, commanded all forces in Afghanistan, served as the guy who turned around special operations in Afghanistan. Chris Fussell, 15 years as an officer in the Navy SEAL teams, now the president of the McChrystal Group. They are here to talk to you, and I'm going to get out of their way, about what you do right now if your business is upside down, turned around, as we all are. Good morning, General. Good morning, Chris. Good to have you, General. I'll give you the floor. I'm sure the demand for your services is high. What is your first advice for CEOs who are just looking at a new world?
Hey, Hugh, thanks for having me. It's great to be on again. I think the first is to recognize that it is a new world, and the term I would use is a new normal. We are going through a crisis now, and we can tell ourselves that it was absolutely impossible to predict, but you and I are both old enough to have seen crises before, know that they will always come, although the form of them is a little different, and we'll always get through them. But the question is whether we do that easily or whether we make it harder than we should. What we do at McChrystal Group is we help organizations deal with the short-term crisis. But really, we help them reshape the organization as we did Joint Special Operations Command in Iraq, so that it operates in a way where crisis, I'm not going to say is anticipated with enthusiasm, but crisis is dealt with pretty easily because you change the processes and culture of an organization so that it is ready to operate in a different kind of mode. I will argue that the new normal in our society is going to absolutely demand that. We're working up in Boston right now with Mayor Marty Walsh and helping his team, not just the internal team of the government, but the wider team of all the stakeholders pull this together for COVID-19. And this is the kind of model we think is needed around the country. Let me pass it to Chris, because Chris and I have been doing this together for nearly 2 decades now.
Chris?
Thanks, Dan, and thanks you for having us on. During my time in the SEAL community, I was able to spend both at a tactical level and then spent time on General McChrystal's staff. I was able to sort of observe the tactics behind the global network of communication and decision-making that McChrystal had put into place. And that's one of the things that we're doing now as everyone has gone into this remote work status at a really accelerated pace, helping organizations as quickly as possible, and you can do this in a matter of days, at least to get it started, putting in place an effective remote communications process so that the number one thing we think leaders need to be doing now is talking to as much of their organization on a very high cadence, not just talking to your executives and letting that trickle down. And don't just download your Outlook calendar into your video software and think you've established a remote work status. You probably know the history here as well as anyone. McChrystal was incredibly aggressive here. We resynchronized 7,000 or 8,000 people on one video call every 24 hours, 7 days a week for years on end. And we think a situation like this is what's really required for business leaders as well.
I think the general will recall that is the single thing from Team of Teams, which I've told people anecdotally is the reason they need to read, is when you took Special Operations Command, General, and you allowed 7,000 people to observe your commands and your structure every day. I thought the security risk was so high, but the transparency message was so powerful that I just think that's a communication breakthrough. And boy, now more than ever, General.
Well, that's right. And if we think about it, part of it is just getting information to people who need it for operational reasons. But also at a time of crisis, people need to hear from not just the most senior leader, they need to watch the senior leaders operate. One, it helps give them context so they know what they should be doing in their area. Second, it gives them confidence because they hear the right things being said and done, hopefully, and they get inspiration. It pulls the team together, and as Chris talked, when we go to this distributed work from home situation, which is essentially what we had to do in Joint Special Operations Command because we were spread across 76 different bases, what we found was you need a way to digitally pull people in. You need a way to maintain personal connections. We called it digital leadership. And I think now leaders have to understand that their role hasn't shrunken because they don't go to the office. It's actually expanded. They need to project more themselves out. They need to talk more, explain more, interact more than probably ever before.
Chris, I got a particular question for you. I've said Team of Teams, most impactful book I've read. The most impactful 20-minute speech I've ever heard is from one of your colleagues in the teams, Brian Ferguson. I don't know if you ever worked with Brian. Brian gave a speech to a group of young executives, and I got to be in the back of the room, and he described the hot wash process that the SEALs used after every mission, a feedback loop that I thought was so powerful. I've adopted that as well. But I'm wondering, as a SEAL team commander, would you use that in the early stage of the stand-up of remote working, or is it too early to see what's working or not? How soon would you ask for that kind of feedback?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Immediately. So, if for your listeners that aren't familiar with hot wash, it's actually the aviators and SEALs and special operations will argue over who created it. But what it is you go out, you do something, and then you brutally review what went wrong, what could have gone wrong, et cetera. It's high transparency, high trust, small team environment at its best. But scaling that up to the enterprise level is absolutely doable. We do it all the time in the clients we work with. And something like this, as you're in a new environment, it's critical to implement constant review along those lines. So every single day now, the organization is redesigning it. So pressure testing and reviewing what's working, what isn't working. Is this the right cadence? Do we have the right people? Are we talking about the right things, et cetera, et cetera? Otherwise, those decisions will be made for you in just the ether of the organizational network. So absolutely, if there's ever a time for radical candor and speed and transparency, it's right now.
General, I can't recall all the ways you introduced your command into giving honest feedback. One was you stayed out of some meetings. You wouldn't get woken up at night. But another one, I think you planted a few questions to demonstrate how to do this the correct way. What is the correct way for a CEO to encourage not bitterness and kvetching and complaining, but genuinely good feedback?
That's a great question because it doesn't come naturally, particularly when you are spread across using digital means because people are a little more awkward. The first thing is a quote that we used to use, and it says, transparency breeds trust, and trust is our freedom of movement because what we needed was the ability to operate. What organizations need is people throughout the organization with the confidence and the information to take action so they're not coming back for instructions and everything. So what we did when we did the big video teleconferences is I would plant questions with young people. It was a little bit of theater. It was to show people how we would respond to them. And we always do it positively. We always, let them talk. And over time, we'd also reach out to them and ask questions so that people in the organization, because you have multiple layers of the chain of command, they all understand that this is not only okay to do, this is expected to do. Now, I don't want to make this sound easy because we ended up with 7,500 people on our call, and I tell people it took about 18 months of us implementing this before I think it was into the DNA of the organization. It was irreversible. And that's 18 months of every single day for 90 minutes.
I'm talking with General Stanley McChrystal, and who is the founder and CEO of McChrystal Group, and the president of the McChrystal Group, Chris Fussell, who's retired from the SEAL teams. Chris, in terms of the number of clients who must be clamoring at your door, I don't know how you're triaging requests for help, but I know that every business in America is upside down. Some of them are not coming back. The National Restaurant Association put out a word yesterday that 3% of restaurants in America, 3% have closed forever. They expect that 11% will close forever. I want to talk about the hardest news you got to give to people and how to do it. How do you let them know we're alive, breathing, maybe with some difficulty, and how do you tell them we're not coming back?
Well, step one is exactly what Stan was just talking about. Getting in touch with your people, not sending big emails. All that stuff is important, but letting them see your face, Software's there. That's easy. Get everybody on a platform and have conversations. One of the things we're trying to work with executives on especially, and you see some natural talent out there in the market as some great leaders are handling this very well, speaking honestly with your folks, recognizing, hey, the world's never been through this in our lifetime, right? No one knows what's going to happen. Here's what we know. Here's what we're doing to adjust to that. Here's what we hope that leads to, and here's the other things that could go wrong. And one of the things that McChrystal would always remind us of as you got more senior in the organization, look, the frontline troops are the ones getting shot at. They know there's a problem before you state that as such, right? So don't come into those environments all crisp and sort of corporate in your dialogue with them. They know the issues. You have to create an environment where you're being honest with them so they can be honest with you. So, yeah, that's the hardest news that a lot of folks are going to have to deliver, not just the next few weeks, but the next few months, most likely, as the entire economy sort of rewrites itself. But start being painfully and radically honest with your folks today would be the key first step.
Last question for you, General McChrystal. I was on Meet the Press yesterday as one of the panelists when Dr. Birx made what to me was the news of the day. Every single metro area, every one, will have a spike, will have a crisis. I don't know that every mayor or county executive out there is getting ready. It's time to lay down partisan swords, I think. And you're like Mr. Nonpartisan. Do you have hope that that's going to happen in the country?
Well, I have hope, but I don't yet have confidence. And what we've been trying to do is reach out to municipalities as we're working with Boston and say, you can do better than you probably are prepared to do right now. And it would be unconscionable not to lean forward. To be in denial, I think, would be an abrogation of responsibility as a leader. And I don't think they want to do that. I think people sometimes lack an appreciation for the kinds of things they can do. And they start by connecting everybody together. Start by being transparent in your team and with other teams, because what's going to happen to every city is happening somewhere else right now. There's absolutely lessons to be learned.
General McChrystal, Chris Fussell, thank you. We'll post the audio of this. I would encourage everyone who's listening, who's running a big organization, to get team of teams at a minimum and try and get McChrystal Group, although there's a limit to how many clients they can have, but they'll figure out the ones who need them the most. General, thank you. Chris, thank you. Much appreciated.